Happy Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by WinBet. We appreciate their sponsorship all year long. This is the Friday NFL DFS version for Week 9. I am Scott Jenstad, joined, as always on Fridays, by Ryan Belongia. Did I get it right this time?
You got it, Scott.
Belongia. I've been saying it in my head, and then I got close to it, and I'm like, I'm going to blow this. So I'm glad we got it. It only took 3 or 4 weeks. We're good to go. Ryan, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am going well. How's your week been?
Yeah, my week's been good. I play a lot of DFS soccer, and that went well this week. But
nice.
We're here to talk about NFL. Before we get into this week, just real quick to touch on last week, because I made some big mistakes, and just one big mistake really, and it's the type of thing that I always think I've gotten over, and then it still happens a couple times a season, and that's reacting to news. We got the Calvin Ridley news, which was unexpected, about an hour and a half before lock when the inactives came out. And I decided Russell Gage was a great play. So I changed my cash lineup to get him into cash. I can't believe I did that. I played him in some tournaments too. And I think he had 0 targets. That's always frustrating when
he played a bunch too. He played like 36 snaps. He played as much as Tajay Sharp played, but just didn't look at him at all.
Yeah, and I did see something where I think he ran the second most amount of routes on the team. So doesn't make it look quite as bad.
Yeah,
but still, it's just really frustrating. It happens to me a lot sometimes with these cheap receivers. You just don't factor in that they have 0-point potential.
Yeah.
Thinking back to week 1, it was Callaway on the Saints who dropped a donut when everyone was on him. That's a little different though. That's not so much reacting to news, but just really disappointed to do that. I mean, I'm not saying Gage was a bad play. He was fine but he's going to be popular. I just don't think it's worth like I was done. My lineups were done. I actually got done early. So I wasn't scrambling. I had all my tournament lineups done.
Right.
And I got the news and I'm thinking, do I leave it? What do I do? And then I get convinced by everyone that, he's such a good play, 4,200, you can just do so much with your lineup if you play him. Yeah. And then the other one was DeAndre Swift, who it didn't really matter in cash because he was the most popular running back in cash, even more than Darrell Henderson. But
right.
when Jamal Williams got announced inactive, I overvalued Swift. One of those things where you just thought it was sort of a can't miss play, and there's really no such thing as that in the NFL. So I ended up with too much Swift and too much Russell Gage, and it was unfortunate because my lineups before that were really good and they would have been really good. I ended up losing a lot of my Elijah Mitchell, who was going to be one of my most popular running backs for tournaments.
Yeah, he was
and
good.
I ended up losing some Michael Pittman when I went down to Gage. So it just total disaster for the most part. What about you? How did it go for you?
Mine was weird. Like it flipped for me before. I was good on FanDuel and really bad on DraftKings. It's funny. It came down to, it's weird. I've been struggling with running backs, and I was really good on running backs last week, but receivers I whiffed on. I played Devonte Smith for Michael Pittman, kind of in the same range, and that right there, you're looking at 20-something points different, and that just when you start in that hole, and I think Pittman had 2 touchdowns before the first quarter was over. I was like, oh, this is bad. And then all of a sudden, the Eagles were up, 180-0 on Detroit, and I think Jalen Hurts threw 14 passes total. Half of those went to Dallas Goddard. So there's 7 passes left for the rest of the team. And just Devonte Smith just had no chance. And it just shows that, game script we talk about a lot does matter. We talk about, oh, well, if they get up, it's because they've done the good stuff. But sometimes it's not. And all of a sudden the second half is worthless for your player. So it's, those Vegas lines, those over-unders do matter, figuring out which games are going to blow out, which games aren't really as important. And let's jump into week 9 here. We got 11 games, 8 early, 3 late. We have 4 teams on bye, so obviously we'll talk about them. That's Seattle, Tampa Bay, Washington, and Detroit. We have 3 primetime games. We won't be on the slate. We had the Jets and Indy last night, which was probably the most unexpected 75-point game we've ever seen, with just a weird game of Indy getting way up and the Jets kind of catching up there, and then but not really threatening that much. But we have Tennessee at the Rams on Sunday night, and Chicago and Pittsburgh on Monday night, so we won't be talking about those games. But how do you feel about the slate in general, kind of before we get going?
Yeah, it's an interesting slate. I haven't figured out really a plan of attack yet. Usually I sort of know what I'm going to do coming into Friday, but we'll get into some stacks later, but there's no games that really stand out to me. Like there's one or two that might be kind of popular that people are talking about, but so there's only one total that's 50 or above, and that's a 50-point total. Everything else is under 50, which is a little bit odd. And there's just a lot of slow games on this slate and a lot of teams that don't really have many appealing options. So I think that's okay for tournaments because it means there probably won't be like chalky games, at least too much where many people go. But I like doing this podcast when I haven't really figured out my route yet. Hopefully my thoughts can, I don't know, hopefully you can come to some sort of consensus. But I'm up in the air right now. What about you?
Yeah, it's one of those weeks where there's not like the obvious, whatever it may be, game that's 56, and we're like, oh, we're going to stack that and then figure out how to piece around that. We have you mentioned the one game over 50, and it's only 50.5. The Chargers at Philly is 50.5. Minnesota, Baltimore is 49.5, and Denver and Dallas is 49.5. But it's a weird week where a lot of the high scoring teams play the low scoring teams, and then you get someone like Denver and Dallas. I think Dallas is like the third highest total in their games all year, and then Denver's the lowest. They're 37 points per game in their game. So it's like, which side makes out? Do we get fast paced? Do we get offense? Does it kind of slow down a little bit? So it's just we have a lot of interesting games like that. We have a lot of NFC versus AFC games too. I saw there were 5. There's 5 games, the most ever, that are Super Bowl rematches over the years. One of them last night was the Jets and Indy from way back time, Super Bowl 3 or whatever. But it's one of those weeks where we don't have those high scoring games. We would have had one with the Chiefs and Packers, but obviously Aaron Rodgers is out on the COVID reserve list. Those 3 games are the 3 that are the highest, but there's no, we're talking 49-50 games, not 53, 54, 55 type games. That Chiefs Packers game was somewhere I was looking to go.
I
think you and everybody else, it would have been like a 57-point total. It would have been a really highly stacked game.
And now there's still some options in that game, but it definitely doesn't look quite as appealing. You mentioned the Chargers Eagles game, the only game with the total over 50. I think if there is going to be like a popular stack, that would probably be it. It's 2 teams that play a little bit faster than most on the slate and a close spread. And then, like you said, we keep seeing these, the teams we want to target as huge favorites on Sunday going against bad teams. It's happened with the Rams a bunch of weeks in a row. Same with the Buccaneers, the Bills a couple times. And now, we have the Bills and Cowboys in those spots.
The Bills are at Jacksonville.
And usually I like to stay away from those games just because, it's not the greatest script a lot of times. But with there really not being great targets on this slate, I think you can go to those big favorites. And you don't necessarily have to run it back like we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, and we have some low total games too. We have the Cardinals and 49ers is 45, so not that low, but kind of at that borderline there. A game that they played the first time, I think it was 17-10 or something right in there with Arizona winning. Then we have 2 really low games. We have New England and Carolina's 41.5. Obviously 2 teams who have played a lot of defense this year and not that much offense. And then weirdly enough, a game that we have years and years and years, stacked, and it's been a big game. Atlanta at New Orleans is 42. Crazy enough, New Orleans is producing a 20-yard play every 28.3 plays is the lowest in the NFL. I never thought we'd have a Sean Payton team that couldn't hit any chunk plays, but here we are, a lot of running. We don't know who's going to play quarterback for the Saints. We think it's going to be Taysom Hill, who got cleared to practice, but we don't know if he's fully integrated, if they want to go use him or go with Trevor Siemian and then kind of mix in Taysom Hill. So makes it kind of impossible from a DFS perspective to figure out how the game was going to be, because it really affects Alvin Kamara too. I imagine by Sunday morning we'll have a pretty good idea, but I think even if we know a quarterback in that game, we could get a lot of mixing and matching. Sean Payton might play kind of rotating quarterbacks in that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. And just to touch on Kamara, yeah, he's the most expensive running back on the slate. I see he has a huge projection, a lot of the places I've seen, but when Taysom Hill was the quarterback last season, he wasn't touching that many passes. And
he had 10 catches total in his 4 starts.
That's a big reason why we play Kamara. And there's another thing too. He only played 60-some% of the snaps last week, I believe, as the returning Mark Ingram saw some work. So, I'm not saying I still like Kamara. What's good for Kamara is the matchup's great against Atlanta, who has been bad on offense and bad on defense, and they're not necessarily great at keeping possession. So the Saints, I would assume, should see a lot of the ball, but they don't play the fastest either. But yeah, so it's a good matchup for Kamara, but I don't know. There's some things that have me considering a fade. We can get into running backs later, but yeah, it's an interesting slate.
Yeah, and with the Kamara thing, just touch on real quick, you've got that, but you also have the fact that it gets to the 2-yard line. Usually they hand it to him, and now if you have Taysom Hill, like that just adds another dynamic in there too. Whereas Jameis is probably not running for 2 yards or running a run option where he's going to keep it, that kind of thing. Every once in a while, Jameis may get loose, but you have a Taysom Hill who has a nose for the touchdown down the 2-yard line, so that really affects Kamara too.
Absolutely, yeah, great point. I mean, a lot of Kamara's value, we would hope, comes from touchdowns, and even short touchdown runs. But with Taysom in there, it's less likely. Absolutely.
And you might get Taysom with Ingram in the backfield inside the 5 too. Like that's a factor also. So I mean, Kamara's awesome, can go off at any time, but there are definitely some factors that make you pretty wary of him at his price tag this week. So, but let's jump into some who we think can be the popular guys. It starts at the top, and the question I'm gonna have to ask you to start this off is a quarterback. And it's with the Packers Chiefs game. It's Jordan Love. He's 4,400. I just don't even know. He's 4,400. I mean, obviously Rodgers was ruled out after the pricing came out, so they had no way to know this. But what the heck do you do here? We got to start at the top. Are you going to play Jordan Love at 4,400 because it affects everything else you do this week?
Yeah, it's a question of the slate pretty much when it comes to cash games, at least. I've gone back and forth on it. The positives, obviously, if you play a $4,400 quarterback, the rest of your lineup looks really good. And he probably only needs to score you, 15, 17, 18 points to be like a really good cash play.
Right.
So I'm okay with it. I've been leaning towards not doing it just because, I'm worried that the Packers are going to try to slow that game down as much as possible. I think we're going to see a lot of A.J. Dillon like we saw against Arizona, a lot of Aaron Jones. They're definitely going to try to run the ball. But they might be losing. They're probably going to be losing, and then Jordan Love would have to pass. I was going to ask you, like, does he have any rushing upside? We haven't seen Jordan Love. I'm not quite sure what to expect. I mean, where do you fall on him?
It's weird. I guess my question is, what points did he have to put up for you to be like, oh, I really should have played Jordan Love? That was obvious. Is it like 17? Is it 20? Is it 23? Like, what does he have to do for you to be like, wow, I really blew that one? That was free money.
Yeah, actually, it probably less than that. Yeah, I think if you told me he was going to score 17, I would play him.
How do you? I mean, Devonte Adams is back, which helps a lot. I don't know. I mean, Love hasn't shown. I mean, he's athletic, but he hasn't really shown. He was 24 of 35 in the preseason for 270 yards, a 7.7 YPA. Everybody says he looks pretty good. Everybody seems kind of ready, but that's so coaches speak. That's going to happen. But it's 4,400. Like, it's just hard. Like you said, I mean, you said 17 points, and like they're like, if you give me 17 right now, you kind of have to take it, right? And that's for a quarterback, that's not that much. With Devonte Adams playing, he's got maybe Marquez Valdez-Scantling coming back. You've got, I think the concern you mentioned is the big one for me. It's, will Green Bay go into we need to keep the ball away from Mahomes, run the ball with Aaron Jones and with AJ Dillon over and over and over. But I mean, the flip side of that is if Kansas City kind of finds their mojo a little bit and scores a little bit, at some point you got to throw the ball to keep up and score in this game. It's the biggest question this week by far. It's how it impacts how you do the rest of your roster. What Jordan Love does is going to determine a lot of what goes on this week.
Yeah. It's such a tough question. I'm going back and forth in my head right now.
There's a lot of ways we just can't know. Like, we don't know what he's going to look like in an NFL game in a really tough stadium to go play in. Kansas City is really, really loud.
Yep.
A lot of quarterbacks in their first year have gone to die there. It's just a tough place to play. Probably the loudest stadium in the NFL right now. Maybe that in Seattle. It's a huge question mark, and everybody tells you like they know what's going to happen is full of it. The fact that the floor has to be really, really low for him to do well is huge, but it's a huge unknown. But 4,400, it's an answer that we have to come up with.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I was just going to say that no one knows what's going to happen or how to project Jordan Love. So, I wouldn't worry about what anyone says or what anyone thinks. I guess sort of just go with what you think would be my advice. I think he's definitely viable at that price, just because, like you said, he doesn't need to score that many points to be a really good play. KC is a tough place to play, but their defense has been a good defense to play against for fantasy purposes for the most part.
I think they've had like one or two games max where the quarterback did not play really well. It's been very rare.
Yeah, and so because I was leaning towards fading Kamara, I wasn't going to play Jordan Love. Now they don't necessarily go hand in hand. I just mean that I didn't need to spend all the way up at running back.
Right.
So I decided to play a better quarterback. I think you definitely can play him though. He's absolutely in play.
So if you go away from Love, let's go to who we think the other popular quarterbacks to be. I mean, the two names that jumped out to me were Josh Allen, 8,200, and Lamar Jackson, priced $900 cheaper at 7,300. Allen has the great matchup against Jacksonville, but another game where, if they're up, 35 to 10 at halftime, what did they do? Did he get him there? Did they run the ball? We get the Jalen Hurts from last week where, they had 40 points, but every running back had 2 touchdowns and he didn't have any. It was a weird game. But the last 3 weeks, Josh Allen has been 3 and 4 touchdowns. He's been the top quarterback in fantasy in 3 of the last 5 weeks. I can go through all Jacksonville's defensive pass stats, but I'll just tell you that they're all bad. So there's just that. There's no reason to go in the exact numbers. And then Lamar Jackson, he's 7,300. He's priced, he's $900 cheaper than Allen. It just looks too low. As you scroll through quarterbacks, you're like, oh, Lamar's 7,300. He hasn't been a huge passing guy this year. He's only has more than 1 touchdown in 1 game. He had that big, I think it was a 4 touchdown game on Monday Night Football. Minnesota should be able to get pressure, although Danielle Hunter is not playing, but they still pressure the quarterback pretty well. But Lamar, just a really great floor with the always possibility for a large ceiling. But where do you fall between these two guys? You think they're the two most popular with Love? How do you think quarterback plays out in terms of a rostership this week?
Yeah, for cash games, I think Lamar will be more popular than Allen.
I do too.
Like you said, that $900. I mean, that's a pretty big difference. Yeah. I think you could almost make a rule that if Lamar Jackson's ever $900 cheaper than the other option, and he's playing at home, when Baltimore's favored, it's just always Lamar because of the rushing upside and the floor. I like Josh Allen a lot this week. It's a great matchup. Jacksonville's been really bad, but I'll Lamar's just a great cash play, and $900 cheaper is just kind of confirms the decision. So that's where I would start. I think you could play Hurts if you wanted to for $600 cheaper than Lamar, $6,700. We did just see him bust for the first time. He finished with 11 fantasy points. Like you mentioned earlier, only threw 14 passes. Unfortunately, Boston Scott had 2 touchdowns and Jordan Howard had 2 touchdowns.
Right. All the Kenneth Gainwell players are like, what about us?
Oh man, yeah, I had a I had a little bit of Gainwell. That
was hard to watch. You're like, oh, Gainwell's coming in. You're like, oh, that's Jordan Howard's music. And you're just like, oh my gosh. So, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah. So I think Hurts is okay because that's a good game environment against the Chargers, like we mentioned, with the highest total, and it's supposed to stay close. And before Hurts had a tough game last week, he had, I think, put up at least 22 fantasy points in every game this season. He's a really good cash quarterback because he's safe for the most part. Very similar to Lamar because of the rushing yards. I would find the 600 for Lamar just because I'm not really a Hurts guy. Like, he's really bad at passing, and Lamar's actually pretty good, I think. I don't know. I feel comfortable, more comfortable playing Lamar, and 600 isn't that big of a difference.
And I think we saw that, Hurts is not game script proof. If they do get a game where they get up, obviously this week against the Chargers, you don't expect that, but it does. He's a quarterback that the second half they're up. They're just going to be eating the ball and handing it off. And he did run some, but didn't get in the end zone, and that kind of killed him. But let's jump into who we think the popular running backs will be. But first, a note from our sponsor at WynnBET. There's one thing we appreciate here at Rotowire. It's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up. I have an incredible offer for you with Rotowire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more all at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino, take a spin on roulette, double down in blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at Baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, all while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcasts. So, Ryan, last week we had a lot of running backs that I thought were really viable, really interesting. We had Darrell Henderson, who was priced well in a good matchup. We had Joe Mixon. They both scored twice. It worked out really well if you kind of went with the obvious running backs. I don't see a lot of obvious running backs this week. There's some guys that are expensive, they're interesting. There's guys that are cheap, they're interesting, but nobody that, like, in the right matchup, priced at the right spot where I'm like, here we go with Darrell Henderson. The one to me that I think would be the most popular, I like the most, is actually Ezekiel Elliott this week at 7,000. They are playing Denver, favored by, whatever it is, 9-10 points, 8-9-10 points, somewhere in there. He was quiet last week, didn't do a lot, but he still had 20 touches, which is, obviously the important thing with the running back. Nice game script this week. He has 15 targets last couple weeks, probably not as many this week because, you figure they'll be ahead. But, Denver's given up a lot of big running back games. Dearness Johnson had 146 yards against them 2 weeks ago. The Raiders running back scored three times combined in week 6. So the matchup's here. The game script is here. The player is here. I think Zeke at 7,000 sticks out to me as the first guy to go to at the running back position.
Yep, I agree with everything you said. It's different than previous weeks for running back. We don't have, the quote unquote lock like we've had with Darrell Henderson or whoever else it's been.
Darrell Henderson the week before too.
Darrell Henderson the week before too. Yep. Zeke is where I would start. Zeke, I think, is the first running back in my cash lineups just because of everything you mentioned. Great matchup, lack of other appealing running backs, I guess also. Really nothing to add to that. Zeke's the first guy in for me too.
Yeah, that's where I was at running back. We'll talk about a bunch more as we get into kind of lineups and tournaments. But was there a receiver that stuck out to you as like, this guy's going to be, the highest rostered? I was looking in, Marquise Brown at 6,000 sticks out as just like a price point that he's been way better than that price. Stephon Diggs at 7,700. If you want to go Josh Allen, if you want to go not Allen, get a piece of this offense still. He's 7,700, has not had that. We were kind of waiting for, we mentioned last week, kind of waiting for that big week, and everybody thinks it's due. You look at air yards, all these stats, like it looks like it's due. The Jaguars mentioned are awful against receivers. Tyler Lockett had 142 yards last week. Jalen Waddle scored twice the week before. But he's only had one top 10 week all year so far, Stephon Diggs. And I know we say all year, but like we're in week 9, so you can kind of say all year now. That's a couple of months of season. Was there a wide receiver they're like, oh, that's everybody's gonna, like last week? I think it was Godwin or AJ Brown the week before. Is there a receiver this week you think can be really highly rostered in cash games and in tournaments that you're like, that's an obvious one? Let's just start there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be one or two of a couple guys.
All right, tell me, because I didn't see one, but I like to hear who you got.
Okay, so initially, well, Amari Cooper's price jumps off the page at 5,700. It's the first time we've ever seen him below 6K. Now
I love Cooper this week. I was hoping he wasn't gonna be that popular, but yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, and he's not going to be quite as popular as he was going to be, because I think it seems like CeeDee Lamb's going to play now.
Yeah.
But if Lamb didn't play, then of course Cooper would be the most popular receiver. But I think there will be some popular ones cheaper than that. There's a few good plays in the low 5K range. The one that sticks out for me the most, and I didn't expect to be saying this, but it's Jarvis Landry. With Beckham not playing, he should for sure see 10 targets, and it's a really good price. I think he'll be popular. You can go just a little below that, and I think Hunter Renfrow might be pretty popular at 4,800 as sort of, he'll see some more targets too now. Yeah. But then I think those 5,300 guys are good too. T. Higgins still looks a bit too cheap.
He's still $2,300 less than Chase, and I love Jamar Chase, but that's a big gap between those guys.
Yeah, right. I agree. It seems it's too big of a gap, and Higgins is just still too cheap, like he's been the last couple weeks. People are talking about Kadarius Toney, and I understand it, because Shepard's out and they're banged up elsewhere, so he seems okay too.
But at least even just mentioned that's kind of four guys in that range too. So at least it's like a little bit spread out. Maybe there's not that one guy, but I think you're right. I was hoping Cooper maybe with Lamb playing would not be as popular, but you're right. It's at 5,700. It's hard as you scroll down not to be like, oh my gosh, this is a stud on a great team with a high implied total. How do I not just slot him in? But with Lamb playing, it helps a little bit. Although Lamb's 7,200, so maybe people are just going to be like, I'll just pay $15 less for Cooper and call it a day. But yeah, I love Amari at the price too.
Yeah, and I guess to answer your question a little bit more definitively, I think Landry will be the most popular in that range. Landry, Higgins, Cooper, all those three are going to be popular. Yeah. And there's another good play in that range we can get to for tournaments, but it's the same price. And Devontae Parker.
I like Devontae Parker this week too.
And I mean, just real quickly, because
we're on the same name, so that's a good thing. I like that.
Yeah, definitely. And we didn't touch on sort of the cheaper quarterbacks that were not named Jordan Love. Yeah. I've heard people talking about Tua as a cash option if you're in that range, which is weird to say, but it's a great matchup. So if he's like a last guy in, you love your lineup and it has, 5,800 left, I think that's okay.
And he was great in back-to-back weeks and then really bad last week against, I guess it was Buffalo. But Houston's allowing 8.6 YPA. Like that, yeah, you could see the matchup there for sure. On Tua. If you don't want to go all the way down to Love, you don't want to go all the way up to guys. It's he was the one guy that stuck out to me kind of in that mid-range. He was my favorite play in that grouping. Real quick at tight end, I know we get to tight end later, but do you think that you think Albert O in Denver is going to be the most? He's 2,600. Noah Fant is not playing. He's on the COVID IR also. Do you think that Albert O, I'm not going to even attempt the last name, Ogwin Bottom, I always mess it up. Do you think he's the guy here in a situation where Denver's going to have to pass, going to have to air it out a little bit? If they're down to the Cowboys, do you think that Albert O is the most popular cheap tight end that everybody kind of goes to, kind of the Dan Arnold and Ricky Seals-Jones from the last few weeks?
Yep, I do. And I was hoping that you would be the one to say his name, but Albert O is fine.
Ogwin Bunam.
Agwin Bunam. Yeah,
I'm sure I messed that up, but Albert O is the way to go. But it's a guy they liked in the red zone last year. Like they, he's a guy that not just like, oh no, Fant's not playing, here's the guy, but like he's actually pretty athletic. He was at Missouri, was a pretty active athletic tight end at Missouri. They like him in the red zone. I think that 2,600 is just so cheap that there's a couple other guys down there that we'll talk about when we get to tight ends that I do like if you wanted to kind of pivot away there. And pivoting away from the popular tight ends is never really a bad idea anyway, because they always have a low floor. But with Judy back, the passing tree expands a little bit with him and Cortland Sutton playing. But at 2,600 in a game that they should have to throw, he definitely stuck out to me.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think he'll be the most popular tight end in cash. I agree with you that there's other cheap options you can go to, and that's what I would do for tournaments. But for cash games, when a guy's going to be the most popular and he's 2,600, it can't really hurt you.
Yeah.
If you play him,
and you
really
don't want to flip. You don't want to flip on the game and he scores, and you're like, that's just
Then you're
80% of people just kicked my butt, so it's never a good
right.
Thing. But, yeah.
So for cash, I think it makes a lot of sense. Punting tight end is rarely a bad option, and we have like a pretty decent option this week. I'll probably go somewhere else for tournaments, but I like it for cash games definitely.
So let's get into some tournaments. We'll hit more tight ends later on, but first a note from our sponsors at Yahoo. The new NFL season is underway, and Yahoo's excited to kick off daily fantasy football. There'll be a ton of big prize contests throughout the season on Yahoo, including their multi-entry contest being now shark-free. To celebrate the beginning of football season, Yahoo Daily Fantasy becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim a free $10 in contest entry credit. Users can take advantage of this free $10 contest entry credit offer to join one of Yahoo's biggest contests. In addition to the free credit, Yahoo now has a $1 million DFS football contest that's live. The $1 million football contest features $1 million in total prizes, including first prize receiving $100,000 and entry into the first ever Yahoo Fantasy Football Championship live finals event, which will occur at MGM National Harbor in Maryland this December. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer to get started. So, Ryan, we talked about a lot of guys who think would be popular at each position. What about passing stacks this week? I found this a tough week to find some stacks. You mentioned earlier there's no like high scoring games. These stacks, there's a couple I like. There's a couple like you've got to put some faith in quarterbacks finding it and getting better than they have been the last couple weeks. That would be the Justin Herberts, the Patrick Mahomes that we know are really, really good, but have struggled recently and have not paid off stacking them. Where are you going in terms of matching your quarterback and receiver this week as you kind of start your lineup?
Yeah, the best answer I can give is I don't know.
It's a weird week that way, right? Like you can argue for a bunch, but like there's nobody like I really want to play this stack and just call it a day and move on.
Yeah, so I was, like we mentioned, I was on Mahomes and the Chiefs, or like a lot of people were before the Rodgers news. Right. I've seen or heard many people off of Mahomes now based on the fact that they think Green Bay is going to try to play slower than basically any team on the slate. And I can see that too. I guess, though, I still like Mahomes more than most when maybe he's not going to be as popular. I don't know. There's been a lot of talk about, just Mahomes being bad and, a lot of people sort of talking bad about him. And yeah, I still like him in this spot. I think he has a good chance to put up 4 touchdowns. There's a chance that I don't know. I still believe in Kansas City. We've been waiting for sort of an explosion game from them, and this still could be the spot. So I'm not off the Chiefs. I'll have some exposure to Chiefs stacks, and I'll talk. I didn't answer your question about the top range at wide receiver, which is another reason that I'll sort of just end up with Mahomes. And that's because I think Tyreek Hill is my favorite in that range. And even I think he's in play for cash too, which is sort of different than seasons past, but they're using Tyreek a bit differently now with teams sort of preventing KC from throwing deep balls. And Tyreek's seen at least 12 targets in 4 out of the last 5 games. He saw 18 last week.
That's crazy. 18 in a game where they didn't throw the ball deep either. I mean, they had 12 for 94 and a touchdown is not what you expect from Tyreek Hill, but like if you're going to get 12, 15 targets, like I don't care where he catches the ball, he's going to turn into good stuff. And that's 18 targets is wild. Yeah.
And Kelsey, Kelsey's been disappointing and he hasn't looked great, and he didn't look great against the Giants. I know he's been banged up a little bit, so that, that makes me like Tyreek a little bit more as well. They still don't have Edwards-Helaire, so that there's, they use that rookie that no one had heard of, but still, I don't expect like too much from the running game.
The best part was people actually thought that was Frank Gore running out there. It was Derek Gore, but like people like saw Gore like, oh my God, did they sign Gore? Did he come back? And I think it was Whoever was doing the Manning cast on Monday Night Football actually thought it was Frank Gore for a second too. It was pretty funny, but I think
that was funny.
I think it was Michael Strahan that was on at that point. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you like see a jersey with Gore, you just automatically assume that it's Frank Gore was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was funny.
What do you do with the Chargers? Like, what do you do with Herbert and either Allen or Mike Williams? They've been one of my favorite stacks the last couple of weeks, and they have not come through. They've been a weird team. And Herbert, like after the game, was like, I didn't expect to see that much cover 2 from New England. I was like, how do you not like play? How are you guys not more prepared for what Belichick's going to do? And it seems like between Belichick and Harbaugh, I guess it was a bye, but they're 2 games before that. It seems like they've been out coached on offense the last couple games, and it's they have a rookie quarterback coach who we love, but I feel like he maybe being a little outmaneuvered, and I don't know where to fall with Herbert. I still think he's really good, and I think I'm going to go back to him, but last couple weeks have been concerning.
Yeah. First, Allen. I do like Allen. Most expensive quarterback. That's okay though. That doesn't bother me. The Jacksonville got shredded by Geno Smith last week.
That's all you need to say right there.
Right. And Buffalo, struggled for basically the whole game until the fourth quarter. So you think they're going to want to get right still. And, we've talked about on previous podcasts how Buffalo is a team that sort of doesn't take their foot off the pedal a lot of times. So even in blowouts, like they should do enough to get there. So yeah, I do like a Buffalo stack, and I like running it back with Dan Arnold again because he's not going to be as popular last week with Albert O and maybe 1 or 2 of the other cheap tight ends. But he saw 10 targets, and for 3,800, now that's 23 targets in 3 weeks. And for 3,400, that's pretty good. And for 3,400, it lets you afford Josh Allen. So yeah, I'm on board with Buffalo stacks. Now you don't have to run it back, but I kind of like running it back with Arnold.
Do you play him? Do you play him with Diggs automatically? Do you go lower, maybe go with like Emmanuel Sanders or Cole Beasley? How do you feel about the receiving part of the Josh Allen stack?
Yeah, great question. That's what I was trying to decide last week, and no. Previously, I would always play him with Diggs, but not anymore. Like you mentioned about Diggs, he just hasn't had many huge games, and he's also expensive. So like last week, I wanted to play AJ Brown and Godwin, and they were 6,400 and 6,900, and it was tough to play Allen, Diggs, and one of them. So I just didn't play Diggs. Diggs can still have a decent game, score a touchdown, and he's not going to be on the optimal lineup for 7,700. You're going to have a few receivers that are cheaper than him that go off for huge games. So no, I don't think you have to pair him with Diggs. You could pair him with Beasley or whoever you want. To that Chargers Philly game. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it yet, but on paper, it looks good as the, quote unquote pace up spot to 2 of the faster teams on the slate, and it's going to be competitive. I'm with you. I like Herbert. It is a little bit concerning, how he's played in recent weeks. To be honest, I haven't decided what I'm going to do with that game yet. What about you? Are you on that game?
I think I'm back with Herbert. I think I'm back for one more ride and kind of see how it goes. I just think that, maybe he just ran into a couple of, defensive minded coaches that really kind of, confused him and did some different stuff. I mean, obviously he looked bad the first time against Baltimore. They blitzed a lot and he struggled with that. And then New England didn't blitz at all. I'm like, oh, I like that. But just kind of played a cover 2 and kind of kept everything. Mike Williams has 4 catches and 46 yards total the last 2 weeks. So it's not like he's got 4 catches last week. It was kind of quiet. That's 4 total. That's 2 and 2. Keenan Allen was still really good. He was 6 for 77, touchdown on 11 targets. So still really involved, but played a lot of underneath game. They're kind of limiting Keenan Allen's upside, but he's doing a lot of underneath stuff, and Williams is the deep guy. But I still think Herbert is just uber talented, and I love everything about him. I love this offense. I think this maybe could be that game that gets a little, gets into the 55 to 60 point range, maybe get a little back and forth. Maybe Jalen Hurts does some stuff. We're gonna need Hurts to do something, but I think that it's a good spot for them to kind of go back and forth. I mean, we just don't have a lot of games that feel very back and forth this week. So yeah, I'm back. I think I'm back with Herbert this week. I think I pair him. I'm pair him now that Allen and Williams are close. I think I might go with Williams He's 7,100. Allen 6,700. I think I might go shift up a little bit. I like the price difference. I liked Allen more the last couple of weeks, but I think that I might shift to Williams. I feel like that with the 4 catch the last 2 weeks, they may just design some plays to get him involved. I think they realized that him not being involved has been a bad thing the last couple of weeks. So I think that Herbert, Mike Williams is actually my stack in that game this week.
Yeah, okay. I like that. And
then back with Dallas Goddard, by the way.
Okay. If I'm on a side in that game, I agree with you. I would play the Chargers side. And I like the Mike Williams call because, people will look at those last 2 weeks and I feel like most people will just play Keenan Allen. So you can get some leverage playing Mike Williams. So what keeps me off this stack, and it's Philadelphia in general. So I might feel, if you feel differently than me about this, then that game looks better, but it's why it doesn't look as good to me. And I just don't ever want to run anyone back on Philadelphia. Like, I understand Goddard. Okay. He's been popular and he'll continue to be popular at that price, but it just doesn't seem like a Hurts pass catcher has a good chance to put up a ceiling game. I mean, they just they don't go off. He doesn't target one guy a lot. He doesn't throw that many passes. He doesn't throw for a lot of passing yards. I agree though. Goddard would be where I would go because he's a cheap tight end and he's got, good touchdown upside. But it's the reason why I don't want to play Hurts too on the other side. I haven't been playing Hurts in GPPs. Because I just don't want to pair him with anybody. You mentioned Devonte Smith last week. I've tried to make that work and, you want to make it work, but when you see the other receivers in his salary range, 1 or 2 of them are for sure going to have better games unless, Devonte Smith has multiple touchdowns. So it's possible, but the Philadelphia side just keeps me off of it. But I like the Chargers side. I agree with you on that.
I think for me, it's Goddard. I played Devonte Smith last week and I liked it, and then he hit 3 targets. But again, they threw the ball 14 times. So I think we kind of throw that game out, but he's been up and down. He hasn't scored since week 1. He's got 9 targets, then 4, then 9, then 3. There's a lot of variability in this offense. I think the one guy that doesn't have that is Dallas Goddard. He's 4,500. They had 14 passes this week. He had 7 targets. That's if you go deeper in that game and they have to throw the ball more, who knows how many targets he has. I think without Ertz there, I think he's clearly the pass catcher I would play coming back there. One more stack I want to ask you about before we get into some running backs and receivers. What about this Cleveland-Cincinnati game? Cleveland is obviously up in the air right now. Odell Beckham is probably going to get released here. If he is not, it'll get released in the next couple hours. They work out some contract stuff. You mentioned Jarvis Landry earlier, but what do you do with the Cincinnati side? They obviously lost to the Jets last week, which seems impossible when you watch the Jets last night. Indianapolis, just literally ran up and down the field on them. But you've got Joe Burrow at 6,800. He has 3 touchdowns these last 3 weeks. He's the only quarterback in the NFL with multiple touchdowns in every game. He's got 2 really good passing options with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. What do you do with this game? Are you thinking about stacking the Bengals against the Browns?
I think, I think it's a sneaky stack. I don't think many people will go there because it's 2 of the slower teams, and people normally don't like targeting Browns games.
Because they're gonna hand the ball off a lot.
But I like it more than most, I would say. Because it has to do with Jarvis Landry being a really nice run back, and Nick Chubb, is a decent play too. That I don't think we'll see. I don't think he'll be too popular. And I think it's it should be a bounce back game for Cincy after that disappointing loss to the Jets.
They gotta be pissed off in that locker room this week, right?
Definitely. And when there's just Chase and Higgins, so when there's good plays, good standalone plays, it makes me consider the stack more. So if Chase, Higgins, and Landry are all good plays, then the stack seems totally in play. So yeah, I agree with you. I like those situations when there's a game that has individual plays that are appealing on their own. I think the stack just makes sense. Regardless of how the game's projected, this is the NFL, and games, depending on what happens early in the first quarter, this game could shoot out. So yes, I'm on that stack. I don't think it'll be too popular either. What do you think?
Yeah, and you look at Cleveland. I think we kind of thicken them as a good defense. You got Myles Garrett and all that, but you look at what wide receiver ones have done against them. Deontay Johnson was 6 for 98 last week. DeAndre Hopkins 2 touchdowns the week before that. Jamar Jefferson 6 for 84 and a touchdown. Brandon Cooks 9 for 78 and a touchdown. Tyreek went for 197 on them earlier in the end of week 1, 11 catches. So they've given up a lot of big receiver games. I think the question for me, I do like as a stack question for me, is what you do at the receiver spot, because Higgins is 2,300 less than Chase, but Chase, had a 200-yard game a couple weeks ago. Obviously, a huge stud. But Higgins is seeing downfield targets. Like he had 15 the week before we talked about. He had 4 for 97 on only 6 targets last week, but 4 for 97. Like he's seeing the ball downfield. It's hard not to click the 2,300, but I wonder if everybody else will see that and just click the Higgins button too. And I wonder if Jamar Chase goes pretty under rostered this week, just based on the price difference between the two of them.
Yep, I agree with everything you said. I think Chase will be a bit under rostered because of the price difference. And I also agree that I'll probably just go to T Higgins if I was going to do that. Like you said, the targets have been good. The downfield targets are encouraging, and I don't want to miss the big T Higgins game. We've been rostering him, and he hasn't gotten the end zone since he's in the last 4 weeks. Yeah, since he came back from injury. He's having a big game soon. I would hate to miss it if I'm going to play this game, and I would hate to miss it when he's still at such a good price. But now, to your point, that is the type of thing that makes Chase a really good tournament play. So yeah,
if I stack them in a tournament, I'm doing it with Chase.
I love it. I love it because people are going to go to Tyreek in that range. People will play Diggs. He'll be a little bit less popular in a matchup against Cleveland. It just makes so much sense because, as we've seen and as you've said, he has the type of ceiling to be the highest scoring receiver on the slate. So yeah, I love it.
Any other stacks you really want to get into before we hit some running backs and receivers here?
Sure. There's a couple. I think Dallas will be a popular spot to go.
Sounds like Dak's playing.
Yeah. Now, again, I think that's fine. I don't think I'll stack that Dallas game, but it's going to be pretty popular too because people will use Albert O at tight end and then play a few Cowboys. And I think that's fine. It makes a lot of sense. The Cowboys should put up points. The Cowboys should win comfortably. So yeah, I want to say
I think Zeke being very popular will limit a little bit how much the passing stack is popular. But yeah, I think people will see that game. They'll see Amari. They'll see Lamb. They'll see Dak. I think there'll be plenty of Cowboy stacks too. Yeah.
So then, there's one that I would say is sneaky.
Okay. Let's hear
Giants Raiders.
Wow. All right.
So there's
it's sneaky enough that I'm actually curious which side you're going to go with.
Yeah. I would probably go with the Giants side.
Okay.
But I think both sides are the same. I think both sides are fine. And the reason I think it's like sneaky good is because it should be like one of the faster games on the slate. And there's a lot of games on this slate that are sort of just slow and that I'm almost just going to cross off.
Right.
And the pricing in this Giants Raiders game is good on both sides. And the plays look better too, because now you can play Hunter Renfrow, like we mentioned. You can play Bryan Edwards. Darren Waller becomes a better play now.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs is a better play now. All these guys are going to have a little bit of increased target share and usage. And then on the Giants side, they have a bunch of injuries too.
Yeah.
Devontae Booker looks pretty good as a cheap running back. Kadarius Toney looks good. Again, there's just a lot of cheap plays that look good. So again, when that's the case, I think the stack makes a lot of sense. I don't actually know which side I prefer. It will depend on the injury news for the Giants, I think. But yeah, I just think there's a lot of good plays on both sides. We didn't really touch on running backs below Zeke, but Jacobs and Booker are 2 running backs that are in play this week.
Yeah.
And Kadarius Toney and Hunter Renfrow are 2 of the receivers that look better this week also. So I'm okay with that stack. And the last one I would mention is Miami-Houston. And that's because it's a great spot for Miami. Tua is in a good spot. Devontae Parker we like we mentioned.
Yep.
And then people had been playing Brandon Cooks basically every week. I had not played him once. We talked about it on this podcast because of Davis Mills. But now with Tyrod Taylor starting, Cooks is back in play. He's going to see 10 targets. He has a better chance for a good game when Taylor's in there over Mills. So yeah, I like stacking Miami and running it back with Cooks.
Yeah, I think that that makes sense. I like the Giants Raiders one interesting. That's a game that doesn't really stick out when you look at it on the slate, but then you think about it a little deeper. There's a lot of offensive weapons there, and neither defense you're super scared of. So I do like that too. But let's jump into running backs and receivers. We kind of hit a lot of them already as we're talking stacks. We're talking optimal high owned guys. But at running back, I just want to ask you on the top end. We've got Alvin Kamara's 8,200, Austin Eckler's 7,900. Dalvin Cook is 7,700. I would guess that Eckler is being the most popular of this group, but how do you feel about these guys? If you're paying up this week at running back, which of these 3 are you attacking?
Yeah, Eckler would be my favorite. I agree with you that I think he'll be the most popular too, but not like by a crazy amount.
Yeah.
Kamara is still going to be popular. I don't really think people are going to go to Cook.
I don't either.
So it makes him a decent tournament play if people aren't going to roster him. But, there's a reason, I guess, that people don't really like Cook either. He
only played 47 snaps this week, and then nobody's rushed for over 60 yards on Baltimore. Although Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon had 111 yards combined, so it's a little bit of a skewed stat that's been going around this week. But my thing with Cook is he had 6 catches week 1. He has not topped 2 catches since week. So you're not getting that out of the backfield stuff. Maybe if they're down this week against Baltimore, you get that, but it's hard to get there at 7,700 for a guy who's playing less snaps, not catching the ball, and in a bad matchup. It's just a lot of things lining up against him. Granted, he's Dalvin Cook. He can go off for 150 yards anytime, but there's a lot of stuff stacking up against, staying away from Cook this week.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my thing with Cook too. The reason we like to play Dalvin Cook was because he has a lot of receiving upside. But that just hasn't been the case. And if he's not catching balls, if he's only catching 2 passes, then he shouldn't be 7,700. He should probably be 6,500.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think people will play Cook. I like Eckler too. I agree. Eckler in that range.
Eckler has 17 targets the last 2 weeks. They're using him a ton out of the backfield, especially as they're seeing some different defenses. We talked about Tyreek, a couple other expensive receivers. Is anybody going to have Debo Samuel at 7,800 or Justin Jefferson 7,500 this week? It seems like those guys are kind of way under the radar this week.
Yeah. So
I can't be Debo 7,800. It's crazy.
I love Debo Samuel. I love Debo Samuel. Yeah, he's one of my favorite receivers. I think he's one of the best receivers in the league. And you know what? I was planning on taking some chances on Debo. However, I see that Kittle's coming back, right?
Yep.
I don't love that. That's probably a few targets that go away from Debo, and he's already so expensive. So yeah, I agree with you that people probably won't go there, but I mean, Debo's ceiling is just so high. We've seen it so many times already this year.
He has 3 games over 150 yards, not 100 yards, over 150 yards. It's been a wild, and Jimmy just throws to him over and over and over. Ayuk got a little more involved last week. Kittle is back. I just think the price tag this week, 7,800, it's hard to get there in a game where we don't really know how Arizona just held them to 10 points. That was with Trey Lance though too, but I don't know. And the Niners offense seemed like Shanahan finally found his rhythm in the second half last week for the first time kind of all year. Yeah, I think the price tag's probably going to keep me away on Debo.
Yeah, me too. Real quick, I know we're jumping around a little bit, but at running back, Scott, who do you like who do you like most in the low 6K range, and who do you like most in the high 5K range?
It's a tough range this week. Usually it's a range that I love. Usually it's a range like, I like this guy and this guy and this guy. I don't like a lot there this week. Cordell Patterson, 6,300 has been really active, but you can't run against New Orleans, and you have to hope that he catches a bunch of passes. He probably will, but Devontae Booker, you mentioned at 5,900 is probably one of my favorite ones. He had 125 yard total last week. The Raiders are allowing 4.5 yards per carry, and I think a lot of people are going to play Myles Gaskin. I don't trust that at all. I just don't trust. Some of these games he's really involved, some of these he's not. I would go Elijah Mitchell over Gaskin just because he looks so good last couple weeks. He had 107 yards and 137 last week. 18.5% of his runs have been over 10 yards, the highest of any regular running back in the NFL. That's a Rich Rebar stat there. I want to make sure that I give the right credit there. It's a really good stat. He's the clear guy for running in that offense. He doesn't play on third down a lot, but like they hand the ball off to him a lot on first, second down. They run the ball well. Trent Williams is back last week. If George Kittle's back, that changes the run offense even more. You got a little bit of banged up ribs. That worries me a little bit. You always worry that like 3 carries in, he takes a wrong hit on the wrong side. But in that range, I'd probably go Mitchell and Booker. And it's just not a range that I love as much as I normally do.
Yeah, same. And we're on the same page with all that. I would go Booker. I agree with you about Gaskin that people are going to play him, and it worries me too. I understand it. It's a good matchup against Houston, but I'll probably go somewhere else. I'd prefer Mitchell like you do, even though he doesn't catch passes. You don't love that, but he's looked really good running the ball. It's a real tough spot. That low 6K range just doesn't look great. Really tough spot for Cordero Patterson, like you said. I guess if I had to choose one there, it'd be Jacobs. And then just one guy you didn't
talk about a guy I don't trust, by the way, is Josh Jacobs.
Oh man, me too. It's just a guy you hate rostering,
because you're like, the second quarter he's gonna be limping off the field, and you're like, all right, is he coming back? Is he not coming back? Last week it was a chest. It just always seems like it's something with Jacobs.
It really does, yeah, and that keeps me off of him too. Yeah, it's not comfortable rostering Jacobs. One guy you didn't mention. I think Darrell Williams is still in play. Don't love that Gore saw those carries last week, but Darrell Williams caught 6 balls. He's always going to be involved in the passing game, and
he had 110 total yards last week. Like everybody's talking about Gore, but Darrell Williams is pretty good.
Yeah, so I think I'd be okay with Darrell Williams, but yeah, it's not a great range.
It's tough, and I think it makes Zeke even that more popular.
Absolutely, yeah.
One more running back I want to ask you about, and then we get receivers, but first a note from our sponsors at Thrive. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests every week of the NFL season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Here's how you can claim that subscription. Visit rotowire.com/thrive, deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a $100 deposit bonus up to $100, and play in your first paid contest and receive a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. It's easy as that. Last running back I wanted to ask you about, Ryan. We talked about Green Bay and maybe they slow it down and hand the ball off a ton. What does one do with Aaron Jones at 7,200 in that game? He, if they're going to run the ball, you can see a lot of check downs too. Like Jones can catch the ball in the backfield. Devontae Booker had 125 yards on KC last week. KC is not a defense we're scared of at all this season. What does one do with Aaron Jones? He's a really difficult guy to figure out this year. He had that huge first game where he had, I think it was 3 touchdowns, 2 receiving, and has kind of been quiet since. What do you do with Aaron Jones this week?
I wish I knew, Scott.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with Aaron Jones. Probably going to be off of him just because I think a lot of the reason we like rostering Jones is because of what he does in the passing game. I'm worried about this passing game without Rodgers. I don't know how Jones is going to be used there. And if he's just a running back, and I'm not saying he is, maybe he does catch 5 balls. Again, it's just a lot of unknowns, but if he's just going to be running, it's too expensive. And, sort of the emergence of AJ Dillon takes me off of him too. I think they're going to use Dillon quite a bit again. I'd almost rather roster Dillon for 4,600. That's more of like a large field GPP play, like one of those big tournaments, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not feeling it with Jones this week. What about you?
I wanted to, but I just don't know how it's going to look. And you got to think KC stacks the box a little bit with Love back there. It feels like a guy, if you want to toss him in a tournament kind of as a pivot to Zeke, I think it kind of makes sense, but he's probably got to score twice. He's got to catch probably 5 or 6 balls in the back. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen for him to work in a game. We don't really know where to go with the running back. He doesn't have 20 carries in the game all year. He had 15 last week. He had 6 the week before that. It's just, I assume they're going to hand it off a lot more with Love, but I just don't know what their game plan is going to be. Any love for Zach Moss at Jacksonville? Great game, 5,300. Outsnapped Devin Singletary 47-25 last week. He'd probably need a TD, maybe 2 for it to really work, but you could see that in a game where they should just smoke Jacksonville.
You read my mind, actually. He's the cheap running back that I was looking at. So, yep, I do like Zach Moss. Obviously, there's risk to it, but he's going to need to get in the end zone, like you said. But taking all those snaps over Singletary, very encouraging. And the matchup is just really good. I think Zach Moss is like a really good bet to score a touchdown this week. It was crazy to see him, I guess, a little bit more involved in the passing game. Catching 6 balls last week. That's not something I ever expected to see from Zach Moss. So I'm on the same page as you. It's a good price tag. And then also the fact that we just talked about all those 5 and 6K backs that, we don't necessarily love, and there's nothing that like jumps off the page. That sort of stuff makes me like guys like Zach Moss more.
Yeah, I think that's fair. At receiver, we have talked about a lot of the mid-range options to headline up here already. We talked about Amari Cooper. We talked about Devonte Parker had 11 targets last week with 2. He's only played 5 games, but he has 7+ targets in all 5 of those games. He's 5,200. I like that. We talked about Denver a little bit. You could go with Sutton or Judy. Judy's 5,000, Sutton's 5,900. What does one do with DJ Moore this week? He was like the belle of the ball the first month of the season, as the Carolina offense and their quarterbacks have sputtered a little bit. He's down at 6,400. The targets the last 3 weeks are still 13, 10, and 8. He still has 73, 73, and 59 yards in those 2 games. So, he's been quiet, but not like that quiet. Not like Mike Williams quiet. Quarterback situation's a mess. Sam Darnold is in the concussion protocol. We don't know if he's going to play. I actually think PJ Walker's kind of intriguing if he does play, in terms of I think he can throw the ball and maybe hit more deep a couple times. At 6,400, he's kind of in a weird range where he's above the Cooper, the Parker, the Renfro, all those guys we mentioned, but below the Tyreek and those guys we mentioned too. What do you think DJ Moore falls for you this week?
Yeah, that game looks like one of the worst targets on the slate.
It's a terrible. I think the over-under is 42. It's a terrible game to really hope for a lot of points.
Yeah, it's initially a game that I just cross off and make my decisions easier. So this is the time, I guess, we can bring up, is Christian McCaffrey going to play?
He's still up in the air. I tend to think it's going to be one more week, but they have not ruled him out. He kind of did some practice stuff yesterday, but it's still up in the air a little bit, and obviously that impacts a ton if he plays. I think it's gonna be one more week, but that's me guessing right now. We don't know for sure. That's definitely check the news and see what's going on with that offense. And same with obviously got to do the same thing with Sam Darnold.
Yeah. Okay. So with DJ Moore, I don't think you could play him if McCaffrey plays. But if McCaffrey plays, yeah, I think I don't mind it, because I just don't think he's going to be popular. But yeah, I can't go there. I just don't want to target that game, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair.
DJ Moore, or I agree with you. I think PJ Walker's intriguing also. It's just a game I want to stay away from.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the status. They didn't give McCaffrey an official practice status yesterday because he's not technically on the active roster. So he's out there practicing, but we don't have a designation yet because he hasn't been activated yet from the IR. So I think it's gonna be another week, but we'll see kind of if he practices today, how that looks today. The only other receiver in this range I wanted to ask you about. We talked about DeAndre Hopkins a little bit earlier. He is he's been banged up. He's not playing a lot of snaps. It's clearly he's not 100%. Kyler is not 100% to play this week either. I think Kyler's going to play against 49ers, but we'll see. If D-Hop is limited or doesn't play, and AJ Green is out, he's on the COVID list too. Christian Kirk at 5,300 becomes a really interesting play. He has 19 targets the last 3 weeks. I think he's someone at this range at 5,300. You mentioned Jarvis Landry. We mentioned Amari Cooper. We mentioned Devonte Parker. A lot of guys in this range. I think Kirk might slide through. If Hopkins is out, he won't slide through because people will figure that out pretty quick. But if Hopkins plays and maybe he's a little limited and AJ Green's out, I do like Kirk this week at 5,300 to see a lot of action.
Totally agree. Hopkins was extremely limited against Green Bay.
He played 15 snaps, right?
Yeah, he can't be 100%, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems impossible. And yeah, with AJ Green being out, yeah, I really like Kirk, and I agree with you. Everything you said, I agree with. He's going to slide through the cracks a little bit with all the great options in that range. Obviously, if Hopkins is out,
yeah, I think the slide through the cracks ends if Hopkins is out. But if Hopkins plays, I think he probably will. He's one of those guys that kind of seems like he wants to tough it out. I think that Kirk's interesting if like Hopkins doesn't go full complement of snaps. You could go Rondale Moore, but I think Kirk's a little more solid there.
Yeah,
what about
actually, sorry, just to agreeing with you that I almost think Kirk's might be a better play if Hopkins is active.
I do too.
Yeah.
Because I think people, Rondale Moore, 4,200 people might go to, but I think Kirk a little more expensive is just a more solid play. What about under 4,500? Are there? There's a number of names down here. We've got we mentioned Bryan Edwards with Henry Ruggs obviously out. Edwards is 4,100. I like Edwards more than Renfrow just because I think you get the target bump, but you just get a lot more upside with Edwards. He might hit a deep ball. Renfrow gets a lot of targets, but they're all just short targets. I think he has, what does he have? 1 touchdown all year, something like that. He hasn't topped 80. He has 2 touchdowns all year. He hasn't topped 80 yards. Just so limited upside with Renfrow. I think if he's going to be popular, I'm going to actually go elsewhere on that one. I'd go Edwards. Rashad Bateman's 4,000. He's been really active, 6 targets each game. Sammy Watkins is back. Maybe that hurts him a little bit, but I think Rashad Bateman's talented at 80 yards last week before the bye. People maybe forgot about him since the bye week came up. You mentioned Russell Gage and how he was did not do anything, but Tajay Sharp was the benefactor there. 6 targets, 558. No Calvin Ridley again. I think Atlanta's going to have to throw. What do you do under 4,500 here? Is there anybody that really sticks out to you?
Yeah, there's a few guys. Mostly we're on the same page again. Bryan Edwards, I agree with you. I prefer him over Renfrow in tournaments for all the reason you said. Renfrow's lack of upside. Just real quick, we mentioned who are going to be the popular cash plays. And all the guys I mentioned are true: Landry, Higgins, and Amari. But I'm seeing some places Renfrow as the most popular cash play.
I saw that too. I'm not doing it.
Right. Now, I think that's fine in cash. I think he, good chance he sees 10 targets. Yep. But I totally agree with you that I would go to Edwards for tournaments over Renfrow for sure. I like Bateman. Like you said, just talented first-round draft pick, really cheap. As far as maybe someone you didn't mention, I still have interest in Mecole Hardman for 3,900. Keep seeing a lot of targets, and I think he has more touchdown upside than the other receivers in that range. What about you? Like in the 3K range, is there anyone else like any like sort of longer shot guys you might like?
Not really. I usually do, and really, like Hardman's the one guy in the 2000s I mentioned. The one name I will mention, and it will make you cringe, but at 4,100, at 3,700 cheaper than the other the receiver opposite him, Brandon Ayuk had 7 targets last week. I think that if Debo Samuel does have a little bit of a calf injury, if he were to something would happen to that in practice, I think that Ayuk becomes really popular. Obviously, Debo doesn't play, but 4,100. Jimmy really looked at him last week. He's only 445. Kittle is back this week, so that limits it a little bit, but there's a lot of as much negative buzz as there was about Brandon Ayuk the first 4 weeks of the season. The positive buzz is there. I talked about he and Kyle Shanahan sat down a few weeks ago and they kind of figured it out. And the tough love, maybe it's finally starting to work. He's only 4,100. I think in this range you could take a shot there. It is a shot that has a very, very, very low floor. It's a tournament play only. Like he could have 1 catch for 7 yards again. Don't get me wrong, it could happen again. But playing all the snaps is important. Like early in the year, he wasn't playing. Trent Sherfield was playing. Travis Benjamin was playing. It was absurd who was playing over him, but I think Ayuk at 4,100 has an actual real upside that you don't often see down here at the price.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
And if Debo sits, everybody will have him, and it'll be not much fun. But that's him and Edwards, Jamal Agnew a little bit in Jacksonville. He had 12 targets last week, but he was 6 for 38 a touchdown. It's often just so gross, but he has a lot of targets. I don't think I want to go there. We talked about Laviska Shenault last week. It was a huge bust. He did nothing again. I think I'm fully off that one. But yeah, there weren't a lot of the guys in the 3,000s that I really was a fan of this week.
Yeah, no, me either. And that was really disappointing with Laviska. I've trusted the Jaguars a bit too much this season.
It's a mess.
And Arnold did well, but
it was Arnold and Jamal Agnew, just what everybody thought a month ago, right? But we mentioned Arnold. What about tight end? We've talked about Dallas Goddard at 4,500. We talked about Albert O at 2,800. We talked about Arnold at 3,400. You've obviously got Kelsey and Waller at the top. You talked about Kelsey. We're talking about the Chiefs. Waller, we know with no Ruggs is obviously 6,200. He had 19 targets week 1, has not topped 8 since, but another one, kind of like the Stephon Diggs mold. They kind of feel it's coming here at some point. He hasn't topped 65 yards since week 1, which just seems wild. He's 6,200. Kyle Pitts was quiet last week. He's 5,900, but only 2 for 13 last week. Seems like the Carolina really focused on him. They talked about putting Stephon Gilmore on him. I think the Saints will do the same. I think the Saints, without Ridley there, they actually think it hurts Pitts more than it helps him. I think that the focus on him is not a great thing. The cheap guy, you mentioned you had some cheap pivots off Alberto. I have one in particular, but I want to hear who you got there.
Yeah, okay. I have a feeling we might say the same guy for the cheap pivot. We've been on the same page. We've been on the same page most of the podcast.
Hopefully that's a good thing or a really bad thing for both of us.
So yeah, the guy I was going to bring up is Tyler Conklin.
Me too.
Okay, nice. Yeah, he's seeing a lot of targets involved in the offense, and Baltimore. I think they're not the greatest against tight ends, so it might be.
They faced a lot. They faced a lot of good ones, but they've definitely that's been their weakness so far. But they've also faced a lot of good ones. But yeah, it's been not great for them there.
So yeah, it's a good salary, and Minnesota will probably be playing from behind. So yeah, I like Conklin. That's who you were going to mention.
It just feels like he's a little too involved for only 3,000. Like he had 7 targets last week, 5 targets before, but like though he's doing something with the targets. He had 5 for 57 and 3 for 71. So it's not like a Cole Kmet where you get a bunch of targets and he's look up and he's like 3 for 22. But it actually like getting some yards involved in that offense. With Jefferson and Thielen, there's a way they can focus on him. I think that Conklin's a nice pivot away from Alberto. I do like Alberto, but I think Conklin in the tournament makes a lot of sense to kind of get away from the chalk there. But I think I'm going to go with a lot of Dallas Goddard. He's only 4,500 and just he had 12 targets the last 2 weeks with Ertz out. We mentioned earlier Eagles threw it 14 times. He had 7 of those targets. The Chargers have also another team that struggled versus tight end, so I like that. Mike Gesicki's kind of always in that range. He only had 4 targets last week, but he's always involved. Good matchup this week against Houston, but maybe they shut it down early. He's 4,900. But I think for me, it's a week that I'm going to save at tight end. I'm going to go Goddard on some lineups. And if I don't go there, I'm going to go all the way down to Albert O and Conklin.
Yeah. I just wanted to touch on Goddard again. I didn't mean to, I kind of wrote him off a little bit when I was talking about the Eagles, but everything. I
think it felt like you were running off the Eagles more than Goddard.
Yeah, but no, you're absolutely right about Goddard. I mentioned that like I was worried he might not be able to have a ceiling game, but that's completely wrong. He would have had a huge game last week if the game stayed close. Like you said, seven of the 14 targets. He's too cheap now that they don't have Ertz. So yeah,
I think he's a red zone guy too. Like when they get down there, he's going to look at him. I just think it all kind of lines up. Without Ertz in there, I think he's too cheap. Too cheap this week.
Agreed, and I also agree that I'll be mostly paying down. I'm not sure if you mentioned Jared Cook, but he's okay. Still too cheap, especially with Herbert. And then people don't like to go back to a play like Dan Arnold, who does well for you 1 week as the popular punt. And then now he's a little bit priced up in a tough matchup, but it's still very cheap. I mean, if he's going to see 8-9 targets, I mean, that's exactly what you want for 3,400. And with people playing Albert O, I don't mind going back to Arnold. So yeah, just in general though, I'm going to be in this range too. Yeah. Goddard. And then some of those 3K guys. I agree.
Yeah, and Jacksonville clearly likes Arnold. They traded for him, and then he kind of came in and has a bunch of targets. What are you doing at defense this week? I think the key question, I think, is like, do you go with the Chiefs? They're playing as a rookie quarterback. They're at home as a big favorite. Like all that, like formula stuff kind of lines up. They're 2,300. But the Chiefs defense has not been good. They did have 3 sacks last week, but their DC's been better last 3 weeks, but they're still not been great. Do you play them, or are you going to go up more than like some of these plays in the 3,000s?
Well, for cash games, I'm just absolutely going to play the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will do the same.
Right. There's just, I mean, You play any defense in the NFL if they're $2,300 at home against Jordan Love. It's you just do it. We know he's not a rookie quarterback, but it's pretty much the same thing.
It is.
And you mentioned, Arrowhead's a tough place to play, and they're 2,300. So if you're playing cash, just put the Chiefs in, and use the salary to make the rest of your lineup better. For tournaments,
in tournaments, where else are you going if you want to get away from?
I want to ask you. You've hit on some good defenses.
It's been a good run. It's been a good run of defense. Yeah.
So what do you think?
I'm going with Dallas at 3,300 against Denver. Denver's allowed multiple sacks in every game. Kind of the part of the reason we went with Washington last week, and they ended up with 4 sacks last week. So that streak continued. I always like to get a floor of sacks. You're hoping for turnovers, you're hoping for pick sixes, but you get that floor of sacks. You get those 3 or 4 points to start out with. Means teams are getting pressure. Means guys are rushing the ball. I don't love to go against Teddy Bridgewater because he usually is pretty safe. But if Dallas gets up in this game, second half, if Dallas can get pressure on him, he's got to throw some passes. I think they're priced well. The Bills against Jacksonville makes a lot of sense, but they're 4,000. So if I can save 700, get down to Dallas, I think that's where I go. I do like the Saints this week at 3,700, but I think I'd save the money again with Dallas. The Saints have 10 sacks last 3 weeks. They forced 3 turnovers against Tom Brady last week. It's impressive. Going against the Falcons team that doesn't have Calvin Ridley. I think people will go with Miami against Houston just because it's against Houston, but Miami has 1 sack the last 2 weeks. Houston did allow a lot of sacks, but that was the Rams last week. So I think my answer to your question is Dallas at 3,300.
That's who I would have said too. So, continue to be on the same page. Dallas.
I like it. We're either headed for a good week or we're headed for a lot of commiserating next week.
Right. I think it's going to be a good week. I don't know.
It's an interesting week. Without those high total games, you really have to kind of pick through and figure out who, players you like rather than games you like. And I actually prefer those weeks. I don't like the weeks where there's, 2 games that are 56 and everybody's playing the same ones. You kind of have to play those. I do like weeks where you can pick and choose and kind of find some games that you like a little bit more. You mentioned the Giants and Raiders. That was an interesting point about maybe that's a game that sticks out a little bit. Like the total maybe is a little lower than you think it should be.
Yep. Agreed. And just one other defense, sort of a longer shot that people won't, this is a bad defense. People won't play this defense, but they're cheap and they have some fumble recovery upside, I would say, interception upside. And, that leads to a possible touchdown. And that's the defense that's going against Taysom Hill and Trevor Siemian. Now they're one of the worst defenses in the league, but the Falcons for 2,500, it's a large field play where a touchdown and double-digit points could do a lot for your lineup.
Right. No, that's so you're looking at tournaments, and I think a lot of people are going to look at Kansas City and just kind of automatically put them in. So anything you can get it to be a little pivot away, especially on defense, which is so variable with who really does well. Like you said, it's one bounce or one tip pass the other way. I think it's good to have another option in that range. So that's an interesting one there. I looked at Philly a little bit because they were so good against Detroit, but I just don't love going against the Chargers offense. If I were to go under 3,000 with somebody else, it'd probably be the Raiders against Daniel Jones, just because the turnover factor is always an issue there. But I think I'd still go up to Dallas at 3,200. I think they're close enough to Dallas that I'd probably just go with the Cowboys. Yeah, no,
I'm just looking now because I mentioned a $2,500 defense. Cleveland might actually be the better $2,500 defense. It's never bad, playing a defense that has Myles Garrett. And Burrow throws interceptions. Let me see. Yeah, 5. He's thrown at least 1 in the last 4 games, 5 in the last 4 games. Just options.
Yeah, no, it's always good to have options. I think that you throw Carolina there too against Mac Jones at 2,600, but
definitely
New England doesn't tend to take a lot of risks. But anyway, so I think we've hit everybody. I want to thank everybody for listening to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. We always appreciate that. If you could please rate and review the podcast, it does help us out a lot. Helps people find the podcast. It's always a good thing. If you want to follow Ryan on Twitter, he's at Ryan. His last name is Belongia. I am at Scott Jenstad. Jenstad Jenstad. If you have any questions or as injury stuff's break, I'm sure there'll be some news today that'll kind of affect some lineups a little bit too. Definitely hit us up on there. Other than that, hope everybody has a fantastic week 9. We look forward to seeing how it works out. We'll chat with you next Friday morning. So everybody have a good weekend and take care.
Thanks, Scott.